let's take these probability notes in our spiral. I believe we're on page 17. So probability, you can use probability to measure the chances of an event happening. So the first definition is you need to know the outcome is all the possible results of a probability event. And a simple event is one outcome or a collection of outcomes. So if we were looking at rolling a dice, you have an outcome of getting a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are all your possible outcomes. And then the simple event is just one outcome, what you're looking for here. The probability of an event is a ratio, it's a fraction that compares the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. It's like thinking of a part to whole. So when you see P event, it's read as the probability of an event. But this is how you're probably going to see it here. P green is read as the probability of choosing green. If you have a bunch of marbles in a bag, and some are green, blue, yellow, red, what's the probability of choosing green? The way that it's set up is the probability of any event is the number of favorable outcomes, that's in your numerator, and then the number of possible outcomes is in your denominator. Another thing to remember is the probability of an event is between 0 and 1. Sometimes you'll see us talking about it as fractions, like there's a 50-50 chance it's going to rain this weekend. So if the probability of an event is 0, the event is impossible. If the probability of an event is 1, the event is certain to happen. So what's the probability that you're going to win the game? If it's against an opponent you've never seen, you might say it is 0.5, 0.5, or 50%. If you're playing a team that you have never, ever, ever beaten, and you've already lost to them 5 times this season, maybe you think it's impossible. But the event could also be certain to happen as, what's the probability that I'm going to give you homework tonight? You could say it's 1, certain to happen, or you could try to be optimistic and guess somewhere in between. Here's an example down below. Find the probability of rolling a 3 on a basic 6-sided number cube. Well, what do we have? We have got a 6-sided number cube, so it's 6. That's the number of possible outcomes, and there's only one 3. So the probability of rolling a 3 is 1 out of 6. If I were to say, what's the probability of rolling an even number? Well, it's still at 6, and you have 2, 4, 6. You have 3 even numbers, so it would be 3/6 or 1/2. There are 2 types of probability. We have theoretical probability and experimental probability. So theoretical probability is what should happen in a perfect world. In theory, if I flip a coin 100 times, I should get 50 heads and 50 tails because I have flipped it 100 times, in theory. But experimental probability is what actually happens when you perform the experiment. So if you were actually going to be keeping a tally chart and you flipped it 100 times, you might end up with 49 heads and 51 tails. So the theoretical is in a perfect world, what should happen? And the experimental is what really happens when you perform the experiment. So just a recap, quick summary. Theoretical, experimental probability. Probability is a ratio. It compares the number of favorable to the total number of possible outcomes. Probability of an event will be between 0 and 1. We can change it into percents. And if it's 0, the event is impossible. And if it's 1, the event is certain to happen.